it's a hot day. I'm hanging in the sunshine.
Let's restart that again, shall we? Hey, if you're new here, I'm Liz. This is Creating Crime Time, where I'm your host, and I talk about some creepy shit, and I create stuff at the same time. Just kidding, I talk about true crime, and I create stuff at the same time. So if you're interested, and if that piqued your interest, go ahead, hit that red subscribe button, turn your bell notification on all, and let's get into today's true crime case. Because this dude literally irritates the shit out of me. If you like swearing, if you don't like swearing, I'm sorry. I got a mouth like a trucker. I tried to hold back the swears, okay? I try. I have my moments, okay? So, today we're going to be talking about Carl Panzram, or Charles, which is his birth name. Yes. This man is a doozy, so get ready. Yeah, get ready. So, Charles Panzram was born on the 28th of June of 1891. So this is a vintage case, my friends. Yeah. He was born into a large family in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, and he was the son of East Prussian immigrants, Johann and Matilda. Yeah. He was raised on his family farm, and he had 8 siblings, so it was a large family. So, just to sum him up in a nutshell, he is an American serial killer, a pederast, a child molester, a rapist, a arsonist, a robber, and a burglar. Yeah. He also summed up all of his confessions into an autobiography while he was in prison. He put it all together. Yeah, and he claimed to have committed 21 murders, and also he claimed to have committed more than 1,000 acts of sodomy on boys and men. Yes. This man is just a lovely bunch of coconuts. Yeah. He also used 11 different aliases. So, yeah. And his aliases really aided him in moving in different parts and different locations. That way he could get away with more crimes, if you will. Because this is a multi-state case. This is a legit multi-state case. Okay? Strange. That's strange. Anywho, alright. So, yeah, at a young age, he was forced to work on his parents' farm, and during his childhood, truancy laws came into effect, which, if you don't know what a truancy law is, basically it means if your child is missing from what they're supposed to be doing during the day, so like school, a truancy officer would be sent to your house to rectify said situation and bring child to school, basically. Yeah. Parents would get in trouble, all that jazz. Yeah. Yes. Anywho, so basically this law came into effect and it forced. So basically his parents got super pissed off that their kids they couldn't force their kids to work on the farm anymore. So this led them to not being happy because kids had to go back to school during the day, and that forced the parents to work on the farm day and night. Well, what his parents did anyway is they forced the kids to work on the farm anyway. So literally he would wake up, work on the farm, go to school, get home, work on the farm, and go to bed. And Carl later would say that he literally would have to wake up so early in the morning to work the field before school that he was exhausted as a child. If The kids also didn't abide by what the parents said. There was severe punishments in the household, and this ranged from being chained to being starved. So if the kids didn't basically respect what their parents wanted, they were treated like trash and chained up and were malnourished for a day because they didn't appease their parents. We'll say that. So, he would later state that from a young age he felt that he was different from other kids and that he was not, like, he knew something was different about him. By the age of 5 and 6, he was a liar and a thief, and he claimed to be older, like meaner than the older kids around him. As he grew, he was getting meaner and meaner. Like, he definitely, like, his anger grew more as he grew older. And so here starts the beginning of him getting arrested. So in 1899, Carl would be arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct. Yeah. Yeah. In 1899, drunk and disorderly conduct. This dude was born in 1891, so he was 8 years old when he had his first charge with drunk and disorderly. That's some messed up shit right there. And his second one would be in 1903 at the age of 11. He would be arrested and jailed for being drunk and incorrigible in public. And again, brought to jail. So, same year, he would steal apples and a cake and a revolver. Now, the cake and the apples, I would assume he's probably hungry, and the revolver is probably to defend himself, and he stole these from his neighbor's house in 1903. So, due to his acting out and his behavior, in October of 1903, his parents would send him to the Minnesota State Training School, and this was a reform school for young boys. And according to his autobiography, this is where he was repeatedly beaten and tortured and raped by staff members in what attendees would call the paint shop. So when I started researching this case, this reminded me of a TV show that used to be on, which was called the Most Dangerous Game or something like that. It was about adult men that were trying to figure out what happened to them when they were younger because they blocked out their memories. And it really reminded me of this. I think it was on CBS. Look it up. It was only on for one season, and man, that show was so good. So good. Anywho, so he often would be in the paint shop a lot. Children that went there were said to leave these sessions painted with bruises and blood. That's why it's called the paint shop. Carl hated the school so much he decided to burn it down, and he did so without being detected on July 7th of 1905. So that would be his revenge against all those who would take out any type of anger on him. So this is not the only training school he would go to. In January of 1906, Carl was paroled from the Red Wing Training School, where he had been detained for stealing money from his mother's pocketbook. So by his teen years, Carl was really like hardcore into alcohol. He became an alcoholic. He was repeatedly in trouble with authorities, often for burglary and theft. He ran away from home and became a hobo. Like, I don't like the term hobo, so homeless person at the age of 14. A couple weeks after his parole and 2 weeks after attempting to kill a Lutheran cleric with a revolver. So this all happened after he ran away from home when he was 14. He would often travel by train or car, well, train cars, and later claimed to have been gang raped by a group of homeless people aboard a train. So, yeah. This story is very intense, so if you can't, if it's too much for you, I apologize. So, Carl claimed that when he escaped from the Montana State Reform School along with another inmate, this inmate's name is Jimmy Benson, they're both involved in a string of burglaries, robberies, and arsons throughout the Midwest until they split up. So, now mind you, this is in 1906. 1906. This boy, 14, 15 years old, and he's got quite a rap sheet already. That's crazy to think about. That's absolutely crazy. So, in 1907, at the age of 15, after getting drunk in a saloon in Montana, Carl enlisted in the United States Army. Now, mind you, he's 15. Shortly thereafter, he would be convicted of larceny and served a prison sentence oh man, from April 20th of 1908 to 1910 in the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth. So, and the U.S. Secretary of War, William Taft, he approved this sentence. Carl would claim that any goodness left in him left when he was at Leavenworth. Like, everything that was good, gone. He didn't have it anymore. After he was released and dishonorably discharged, Carl resumed his career in thievery. He stole items ranging from bicycles to yachts. He was caught and imprisoned multiple times, and he did serve time under his own name, but he also served time under his aliases too, and in multiple different places. I'm talking like Texas and Idaho, Montana and Oregon and Connecticut and New York. So Sing Sing in New York, like the worst place to be. In Washington, D.C., like he was incarcerated in multiple different places, like in all under different aliases too, which, like, I'm sorry. The dude was smart. He used many different aliases. Did he get caught? Yes. He's pretty smart with the aliases. Not so much in prison. He frequently attacked officers and he refused to follow any orders. Officers did retaliate and they subjected him to beatings and other punishments. So while he was writing his autobiography in his final stint of prison, Carl wrote that he was rage personified and that he would often rape men who he robbed. He was noted for his very large stature. He was over 6 feet tall. Like, he was a big dude. He was very strong too. So his physical strength, he was very, he was a strong man. And this was due to years of hard labor at Leavenworth and other prisons. And this aided him in overpowering his victims. He also engaged in vandalism and arson, and by one of his own admissions, one of the few times he did not engage in criminal activities was when he was employed as a strike breaker against union employees. So basically, this job was him being able to legally take physical action against others. Smart job for him. On one occasion, he tried to sign aboard a ship's steward on an army transport vessel, but he was discharged when he reported to work intoxicated. So his addiction to alcohol was still very present. So also in his autobiography, which was in 1929 when it was released, after he served a short sentence in Rusk, Texas, he went to Ciudad Juarez, which is in Chihuahua, Mexico. And this was in the winter of 1910. And he tried to enlist in the federal Mexican army, which, I mean, he can't because he's not a Mexican native. So after this, he would take a train back to Del Rio, Mexico, and he got off in a small town which is about 50 to 100 miles east of El Paso. He later claimed that he abducted, assaulted, kicked, and strangled a man about a mile from town, and this is when he stole about $35 from the guy. In money funds now, that's about like $567 from the victim. In the summer of 1911, Carl was going by the alias of Jefferson Davis, which, fun fact, that is the president's name of the Confederacy, like the southern states. That president's name is Jefferson Davis, if you didn't know that. I like history. And so while he was using this alias, he was arrested in Fresno, California for stealing bicycles. He was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, but he escaped after 30 days in jail. In 1913, he would be going by the alias Jack Allen, and he would be arrested in the Dalles, Oregon, for highway robbery, assault, and sodomy. He broke out of jail after only 2 to 3 months. While he was on the run, he used the alias Jeff Davis, so shorter than Jefferson Davis. He would be arrested in Harrison, Idaho. Again, escaped from the county jail. He would be arrested in Chinook, Montana, under the alias Jefferson Davis, and sentenced to 1 year in prison for burglary. And this was to be served at the Montana State Prison. This dude's all over the place. So the 27th of April of 1913, Carl would be using his Jefferson Davis alias, and he was admitted to the Deer Lodge State Prison. Well, it's the state prison in Deer Lodge in Montana. Sorry. But he would escape on November 13th of the same year. Within a week of him escaping from that prison, he was arrested for burglary, and he gave the name Jeff Rhodes in Three Forks. So he would be incarcerated at Deer Lodge yet again for an additional year. So literally he broke out, and within a week he was rearrested and sentenced to the same prison he just came from. So he would be released on March 3rd of 1915, and literally March, we're going to June 1st, he burglarized a home in Astoria, Oregon, where he was soon arrested while attempting to sell some of these stolen items. He would serve 7 years in prison. Well, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and he used the name Jeff Baldwin for this case. And he was to serve his sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem, Oregon. And he was taken in on June 24th. So the warden at that prison, his name is Harry Minto, he believed in very harsh treatment of inmates, including beating and isolating them, among other disciplinary measures. And Carl stated that he would never do that 7 years, and he defied the warden and all of his officers. So with that being said, later in the year of 1915, Carl helped a fellow inmate, Otto Hooker, escape from prison. And while attempting to evade capture, Hooker killed Warden Minto. This event marked Carl's first known involvement with murder, and he was an accessory before the fact. So in prison, he falsely gave his age as 30 and that his place of birth was in Alabama, and he literally stated his occupation as a thief. What a smart dude. So Carl would be disciplined several times while in Salem, including 61 days in solitary confinement before he escaped September 18th of 1917 after 2 shootouts in which he attempted to shoot a chief deputy sheriff, Joseph Frum. He was recaptured and returned to prison. On May 12th of 1918, he escaped again by sawing through the jail cell bars, and he caught a freight train heading east, and he was going by the name John O'Leary at this point. He also would shave off his mustache to change his appearance. I don't mean to giggle. Like, this dude just tried everything to stay out of jail. Like, he didn't want it. He was like, nah, fam. I won't see you tomorrow. I find serial criminals like this super hysterical. So, after this, he would never return to the Northwest again. Allegedly, he ended up in New York City, and he got a seaman identification card and sailed on the steamship the James S. Whitney to Panama. This is said there he tried to steal a small boat with the help of a drunken sailor who killed everybody on board, and he was arrested. So Carl was still free, and he would travel to Peru, and he worked in a copper mine. After that, he traveled to Chile, to Port Arthur, Texas, London, Edinburgh, Paris, and Hamburg. Like, he traveled everywhere to stay away from the United States. Well, unfortunately, he wouldn't stay out of the United States for very long. So this was all in 1917. He ends up in Connecticut. So in August of 1920, Carl burglarized the the Taft mansion. So William Taft, the man that agreed with his first sentence when he was sent to that reform school, he burglarizes William Taft's house in New Haven, Connecticut. Now, this is the former president of the United States at this point. He burglarizes his house. And Carl does this because he believes that Taft was responsible for his imprisonment at Leavenworth. He stole a large amount of jewelry and bonds, as well as his Colt 1911, which is a .45 caliber handgun. So after this, Carl took off on a murder spree, and this spanned about 8 years and in multiple different countries. With stolen money that he took from Taft's mansion, he bought a yacht, which he called the Aquista. He lured sailors away from New York City bars, got them drunk, raped them, and shot them with Taft's pistol. He would then dump their bodies near Execution Rocks Light in Long Island Sound. He claimed to have killed around 10 men at this point. And so the sailor murders ended only after the Aquista ran aground and sank near Atlantic City, during which his last two victims escaped. So on October 26th of 1920, Carl was using the pseudonym of John O'Leary, and he was arrested in Stamford, Connecticut for burglary and possessing a loaded handgun. And in 1921, he would be serving a 6-month sentence in jail in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So, again, he would escape, and he caught a ship that was headed to southern Africa and landed in Luanda, which was the capital of the Portuguese colony of Angola. In 1921, Carl was the foreman for an oil rig in Angola, but he would later burn it down. Out of what he said was complete spitefulness. He later claimed that while in Angola, he raped and killed a boy estimated to be about 11 years old. He confessed to this murder, and he wrote in his autobiography that his brains were coming out of his ears and I left him, and he will never be any more deader. He also claimed that he hired a boat with 6 rowers and shot the rowers with a Luger pistol and threw their bodies to the crocodiles. So after he returned to the United States is when he would rape and kill 2 small boys. One was beaten to death with a rock on the 18th of July of 1922 in Salem, Massachusetts, and he strangled the other one later that year in New Haven. So after his murder spree in Salem, Carl worked as a night watchman in Yonkers, New York, which is north of Manhattan, and this was at the Abico Mill factory. He would have sex with a 15-year-old boy named George Wolofson. In Providence, he would steal a yawl, and he sailed to New Haven. And this is when he was seeking people to rob and to rape, and boats to steal. So in 1923, in June of 1923, he would be in New Rochelle, New York, or New Rochelle. Rochelle, any way you say it. It's Rochelle, okay? He stole a yacht that belonged to the police chief, and this is when he picked up the boy George that he's already had sexual relations with, and he promised him a job on the boat, but instead he would sodomize him again. So, June 27th, on the river near Kingston, New York, Carl claimed that he used a .38 caliber pistol from a stolen yacht to kill a man attempting to rob him on the yacht. Carl then threw his body into the river. On the 28th, so literally the next day, Carl and George docked in Poughkeepsie, and this is when Carl stole about $1,000 worth of fishing nets at Newburgh, New York. George also witnessed the murder the day before. He jumped overboard and he swam ashore, so he got away. After he got away, he made his way to the police, and he reported to the police in Yonkers that he had been sexually assaulted by Carl, and an alert went out for a captain, John O'Leary. On June 29th, John O'Leary was arrested in Nyack, New York. So, July 9th, Carl tried to escape from prison. He later conned his lawyer by giving him ownership of the stolen boat in return for bail money. Carl skipped bail, and the boat was confiscated by government agents, so his lawyer was like shit out of luck with a boat. Yeah. I told you this is a heavy one. This is a super heavy one. Super heavy one. So, on August 26th, O'Leary was arrested in Larchmont, New York, and he was cleared as a suspect in the stabbing of Dorothy Kaufman in Greenburgh, New York, which was committed a month prior. He was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. While in county jail, he confessed to the alias of Jeff Baldwin, and that he was wanted in Oregon. In Oregon, Panzram was imprisoned at Clinton Prison. In October, Carl was imprisoned in the Clinton Prison in Dannemora, New York, and he was discharged in July 1928 because he allegedly committed a murder that summer in Baltimore. Yeah, so on the 30th of August of 1928, Carl was arrested in Baltimore for the Washington, D.C. burglary, stealing a radio and jewelry from a home of a dentist on August 20th. And during this interrogation is when he confessed to killing 3 young boys earlier that month. One in Salem, one in Connecticut, one in Philadelphia, which was a 14-year-old newsboy. Carl later wrote that he had contemplated mass murders and acts of mayhem, such as poisoning a city's water supply with arsenic, or scuttling a British warship in New York to provoke war between the United States and Britain. And so, in light of his crazy criminal career, he was sentenced to 25 years to life. And upon arriving back at the Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, his inmate ID was 31614. He warned the warden, "I'll kill the first man that bothers me." He was assigned to work in prison laundry, where the foreman, Robert Warnk, was known as a bully and to harass prisoners under him. And Warnk patronized Carl, and despite Carl warning the warden and the officers, he it didn't end really well. So the 20th of June of 1929, Carl made good on his threats, and he beat Wark to death with an iron bar. This is when he would be convicted and sentenced to death. He refused to allow any appeals of his sentence in response to offers from death penalty opponents and human rights activists to intervene. He wrote, "To only thanks you and your kind will ever get from me for your efforts on my behalf is that I wish you all had one neck and that I had my hands on it." So while he was on death row, he befriended an officer named Henry Philip Lesser, and this officer would give him money and cigarettes. Money to buy cigarettes, anyway. Carl was so astonished by this act of kindness after Henry provided him with writing materials that Carl would give a detailed summary of all of his crimes and his nihilistic philosophy while he awaited execution. So even though he denied repenting any actions, including robberies, murders, rapes, and arsons he had committed, his straightforward sentence states that in my lifetime I have murdered 21 human beings, I have committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, larcenies, arsons, but last but not least, I have committed sodomy on more than 1,000 male human beings. For all these things, I am not in the least bit sorry. So, Carl would be officially hanged on the 5th of September of 1930. And as officers attempted to place the black hood on his head, he allegedly spat in the executioner's face. When asked for any last words, he responded, "Yes, hurry up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill a dozen men while you're screwing around." He was buried in Leavenworth Penitentiary Cemetery, where his grave is only marked with his prison number, which is 31614. And that, my friends, is the story of Carl Panzram. So there is a book written about him, which is called Man Against Himself, and this book came out in 1938. There's also another book which is called Killer, A Journal of a Murder. This story is very long-winded, very, very gruesome, and I'm actually very happy that this man finally was caught. Granted, he evaded police for a very long time, but I'm happy he was caught. So anywho, I hope you guys enjoyed today's true crime case. Don't forget, put a comment down below of any true crime case you want me to cover, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys.
You should hit me with the splash gun so I cool down.